Hey there and welcome to RPG Time. Today I'm covering one of my favorite JRPGs of all time, Xenogears. It was released in 1998 on the PS1, and it was published by Squaresoft during their legendary run of games on the PS1. The game had started out as a concept for Final Fantasy VII story, but it was deemed too dark and complicated. However, executives saw the potential, and the project was greenlit as an original title. After that, the game was intended to be another sequel, and this time it was a Chrono Trigger sequel, going under the codename Project Noah. But that didn't work out, and the development team started focusing on creating an original title, which was for the best. Now the story behind the game's development doesn't end there, since there was some problems with development. But I will get into that later in the video when it becomes relevant. If you have played the game before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now I want to move on to the plot overview. Also, spoilers ahead. If you want to experience the story for yourself, which you really should, go play the game and come back here. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. About 10,000 years ago, prior to the events of Xenogears, in the year TC 4767, a malicious entity suddenly begins hacking into the systems of the Eldridge, a gigantic interplanetary spacecraft. As the crew exhausts all methods to keep complete control from falling into the enemy's hands, a message began to scroll across their screens. "You shall be as gods." Seeing this, the captain declares for all passengers and crew to evacuate.
See that all civilians and passengers are safely transported to the escape shuttles. I will send a dispatch after evacuation is complete. I am evacuating the ship. All of you, evacuate now.
Evacuate the ship immediately.
As the passengers flee, the spacecraft's own laser cannons turn and shoot them down. As the captain watches the survivors' ships be destroyed, he looks down at his watch of his family, then activates the ship's self-destruct mechanism. In a flash of light, the spacecraft is destroyed, leaving the debris to fall to a nearby planet. In the fallen wreckage, a naked woman with violet hair slowly rises, her dark eyes reflecting the dawn's breaking light, the day that humanity fell to the planet. Now Faye's story begins. 9,999 years later, on the continent of Ignaz, the nations of Ava and Keslev have been waging a centuries-long war. Ethos, a church-like organization dedicated to preserving the world's culture, has recently excavated giant fighting robots called Gears. Although Keslev previously had the upper hand in the war, a mysterious army known as Gebler started providing assistance to Ava, allowing them to not only recover their losses, but begin making their way into Keslev's territory. The game itself begins in the small town of Lahan Village, which is near the border of Keslev and Ava. Fei Fong Wong, an amnesiac 18-year-old man, had been mysteriously brought to Lahan by a masked man 3 years prior. Since then, Fei led a pleasant life and was awaiting the marriage of his two best friends, Alice and Timothy. One night, while visiting the local doctor, Saitan Uzuki, in his nearby mountain home, Fei finds a group of gears flying towards Lahan. By the time Fei makes it back, the town is burning. As the gears storm their way through the village, Fei finds a mysterious gear, and despite Saitan's protests, gets aboard. Initially, Fei has some success fending off the attackers, but when he sees his friend Timothy shot and killed, something awakens in Fei, causing the gear to go berserk. The village and many of the fleeing villagers are engulfed in a bright light and are instantly disintegrated. After the destruction of Lahan village, a distraught Fei is exiled by the surviving villagers. Wanting to avoid possible enemy reinforcements, Fei decides to flee to Ava alone. Upon entering the Black Moon Forest, Fei encounters a strange female Gebler soldier named Elham Eli Van Houten, whom he feels a strange connection towards. As he reconnects with Saitan, he is forced to use the same gear that destroyed Lahan in order to save Ellie. As they rest, Saitan privately asks Ellie to leave, revealing that he knows more about the situation than he let on. Fei eventually meets Graf in a desert, who claims to know about Fei's past. Fei uses Walltail again against some summoned enemies, leaving him unable to fight back when he is captured. Eventually, Fei and Saitan are picked up by Bartholomew Bart Fatima, a desert pirate and heir to the throne of Ava. After enrolling into a fighting tournament to give Bart and his allies time to rescue Margie Fatima, Fei is matched with Dan, Alice's little brother, as well as Wise Man, another mysterious masked man who claims to know about Fei's past. As Bart's party tries to escape with Margie, they are intercepted by Kaharan Ramses and his assistant Mawa Hawa. When Fei joins in to help his friends against the two, Karan finds his fighting style familiar. The party next sets out on an attempt to take back the throne. Fei is placed in charge of a second group composed of Bart's allies. After his party has an initial success against Vanderkam's Dora, Graf arrives and grants Vanderkam the power to overwhelm and destroy Fei's team. Like in Lahan, Fei's powerless and it overwhelms him. Then he blacks out once again. Soon afterward, Ramses intercepts the Wadraskal, ordering their surrender. When they refuse to surrender, he attacks. At this point, a powerful red gear appears and attacks Bart and Saitan. Ramses identifies it as the gear of the demon of Elru, and immediately moves to engage it in his gear, Wyvern. He is easily demolished, prompting Mia to rescue Ramses and retreat. Faye wakes up in a Keslev prison in Nortun. With the help of Saitan, who is posing as a prison doctor, and Hammer, a demi-human merchant, Faye rises through the prison's ranking system to become the new champion, earning his freedom. As Faye is summoned to meet Kaiser Sigmund, the former champion and demi-human Rico Banderas infiltrates the sector, taking advantage of the light and security in order to assassinate Sigmund. Upon being discovered, Rico hides in the Kaiser's wife's room, which causes him to realize that he is the Kaiser's son. Rico is then captured, and Faye and Saitan go to rescue him, just as Solaris begins raining bombs from above. As Solaris begins their purge on Nortun, Faye forces Ellie to confront Gebler and Solaris' terrible actions. Leaving a distraught Ellie, Faye joins Rico to fight against Dominia, who is piloting the bomb ship Hecht. After the battle, the Hecht falls towards the city center's nuclear reactor, threatening to destroy the entire region. Faye and Rico attempt to use their gears to steer the massive ship off course, but find themselves unable to move the ship on their own. Ellie arrives in her gear and joins the effort. As it falls instead towards the residential district, Faye and Rico's gears begin to overheat, and they are forced to withdraw. Ellie resolves to push the ship by herself, an act she nearly pays for with her life, if not for the sudden interference of a mysterious winged gear. Now fugitives for helping Rico, in order to escape the Keslev Empire, Faye's group decides to steal the airplane Goliath in the Goliath factory. As they do so, they are intercepted by Graf. As Faye, Rico, and Ellie battle Graf, Saitan and Hammer manage to use the airplane's defenses against him, repelling him away. As the crew celebrates, the Goliath is accidentally shot down by Bart's ship in the sea, separating Faye and Ellie from the rest of the party. They are rescued by the Fames, a movable floating city ship. After learning Ellie's whereabouts, Gebler attacks Fames to kidnap Ellie, and Maiwa, a Gebler officer, unsuccessfully brainwashes her. Ramses, who holds a vendetta against Faye, attacks Fames, searching for him. Ellie returns to the party, and Faye is left in critical condition. Billy Lee Black, an Ethos worker on board Fames, allows Faye to use the Ethos advanced medical technology. Bishop Isaac Stone, Ethos leader, reveals to the party Ethos' true purpose of controlling the land dwellers, or lambs for Solaris. The group follows Stone to the ruins of Zebom, an excavation site. They discover a young girl composed of nanomachines named Emeralda. Stone, acting under the orders of a man named Krillian, takes Emeralda while the party fights the elements Tolone and Sepharetta. After defeating the elements, the party catches up to Stone on a skywalk overlooking Zebom. This is when Ed, the mysterious Red Gears pilot, intervenes, also attempting to take Emeralda. Wiseman arrives to hold Ed back, commanding the group to go after Stone, who is eventually defeated. The group regroups and finds Faye awake and standing at his gear with a case of amnesia. Faye and his friends decide to ally themselves with the floating city of Shavat, the only remaining city capable of resisting Solaris. They climb the Babel Tower to reach Shavat, where they meet Maria, Balthazar, and the rest of the Choo-Choos. Back on the surface, the group defeats Shakan, the corrupt ruler of Ava. Bart becomes the rightful king of Ava and stops the war with Keslev. The group destroys 3 gates on the surface to unlock the way to Solaris. At the final gate, Sargasso Point, the group encounters Elmeralda once again, now as their opponent. She attacks at first, but recognizes Faye, referring to him as Kim, much to Faye's confusion. The group successfully infiltrates Solaris via Maria's gear, Sysbian. In Solaris, the group discovers that Solaris is actually a futuristic dystopia in the sky, using organizations like the Ethos to funnel resources from the surface, including slaves. Saitan soon reveals himself to be a spy who's been working for Emperor Cain, the leader of Solaris. The party also learns that the Gazelle Ministry seeks to revive God and achieve eternal life, while Krillian seeks to obtain Ellie, as she is needed to resurrect God. However, Saitan secretly releases Faye and his friends, as Cain was actually against the Ministry's plans. Medina Van Houten, Ellie's mother, is imprisoned with her husband, Eric Van Houten, when the Imperial Guard comes looking for Ellie on Krillian's orders. She is eventually rescued by Hammer, who turns on the group in order to take Ellie to Krillian. Medina steps in between Ellie and Hammer, prompting him to shoot and kill her when she refuses to move. Hammer quickly runs away after. Then, Eric tries to cover for the party as they escape, and is killed by the executioner. Overwhelmed, Faye becomes Id and completely destroys Solaris. Back at Shavat, Saitan informs his friends that Id is actually Faye's split personality. Shavat's elders want to contain the power of Id by freezing Faye. This leads to Faye and Ellie running from Shavat. On the way, they are chased by Ramses and struck down. Mortally wounded, they are rescued by Tora Melkor. After a period of 3 weeks, Faye and Ellie are healed by Tora and his nanotechnology, everyone regroups and Ellie and Elmerelda go to the mass driver facility to release the limiters of everyone on the planet. At the same time, Krillian releases a virus, coincidentally mutating many people into Wells, right after their limiters were removed. Those who were mutated felt innately compelled to gather at the various Soylent System facilities located around the surface. There, the Wells, deeming themselves the have-nots, would devour the ones less mutated. The Wells that remained were a crucial part of the Gazelle Ministry's M-Plan, which wanted to gather the best genetic material for Deuce's revival. Once this plan was discovered by Faye and his allies, the group went from place to place, destroying all the Soylent System facilities located on the surface of the Earth, and freeing the people held at each location. All the people that had been mutated were taken in by Nissan, where they received treatment. Faye and his allies then decide to collect anima relics, before Solaris's remaining forces do, as they can transform gears into Omni-Gears. After exploring Anima Dungeon 1 and Anima Dungeon 2, Hammer appears as a monstrous well-gear hybrid, having been transformed by Krillian. After Hammer is defeated and falls to his death, Ellie feels powerless at being unable to help him. As Faye watches Ellie cry, he resolves that he can no longer risk her heart being broken again. Ramses assassinates Emperor Cain after being manipulated into doing so by Maiwa and Krillian at the behest of the Gazelle Ministry. The Ministry then used the Geisha Key, an artifact that manipulates the DNA of humans around the world, turning a majority into mutant Wells. In order to collect the parts necessary to reconstruct Deuce, the very same entity that crash-landed on the planet 10,000 years ago, Mahonen, where Deuce is located, is resurrected from the sea. Faye, knowing that Ellie would be facing the transformed people of Solaris, and this was a battle that they may not come back from, he asks her to stay behind. The two argue, and Faye lashes out verbally, telling Ellie that she'd be in the way if she insisted on coming with. Ellie cuts the conversation short by running off. Faye's friends chide him for not expressing his true feelings, and encourage him to tell Ellie how he feels before it is too late. Faye and Ellie meet and reconcile, realizing the full extent of their journey together, how they both had grown, and how much they mean to each other. The two kiss and make love. During this time, Ellie and Faye remember their time as their previous reincarnations, Sophia and Lacan. Lacan was a painter, while Sophia was the Holy Mother of Nisan, around the time of the war between Shavat and Solaris 500 years earlier. Lacan, blaming himself for Sophia's death, became Graf and sought to destroy the human world in revenge. Although defeated, Graf has transmigrated his mind into other humans since. As Faye and his allies depart from Mahonen, Ellie stays behind and assists Nissan for her own safety. In Mahonen, which turns out to be a part of the Eldridge, Faye and his allies defeat Deuce's larval form. Graf, in Alpha Welltail, appears and defeats the group. Graf almost kills Faye, but is stopped by Krillian. Instead, the party, excluding Ellie, is crucified at a mountain called Golgotha. In Nisan, Ellie senses that Faye is in danger, which is confirmed when Krillian sends a message saying that if she wants to save them, she must go to Golgotha. Ellie does so, and defeats Mugwort and Rattan. but is kidnapped by Krillian. Krillian lets Faye and his allies go, knowing they will come back to rescue her. As the final parts of the plan come into place, Krillian disposes of the Gazelle Ministry, as they are no longer necessary. The party returns in their Omni-Gears to Merkava to rescue Ellie, only to face a crazed Ramses, who reveals his origin. 14 years ago, Ramses was created to be the prototype for an artificial contact, but his destiny was discarded when Maya discovered her new incarnation's son, Faye, was the true contact. After defeating Ramses, the party finds Krillian and Maya waiting for them, as well as an unconscious Ellie, bound on a cross in front of Deuce's massive form. Krillian explains that Ellie, as the mother, must be sacrificed in order to revive Deuce. Ramses then appears, questioning his purpose in life, and is taunted by Maya and Krillian. Ramses, realizing he had been used, kills her and Krillian. As she collapses, Maya remarks that as she couldn't kill herself, this was the only way she could die. Meanwhile, due to Krillian's body being mostly composed of nanomachines, he quickly revives. As Faye frees Ellie, he is suddenly shot by her. The party realizes that Ellie had turned the next and final incarnation of Maya. After revealing the truth about Deuce's nature and his coming plans for humanity, the last Maya leaves with Krillian and is reabsorbed into Deuce. The party is forced to retreat as Merkava raises into the sky, firing a red beam of destruction on the land below. Faye's Id attempts to make contact with the Zohar, located in the land of Bethlehem. Wise Man, who reveals himself to be Faye's father, Khan Wong, stops him, giving peace to Faye's other personalities. At this time, Faye makes contact with the Wave Existence, an extra-dimensional being who is trapped inside the Zohar. Faye learns that he must destroy Deuce to free humanity. Upon making a successful contact, Faye's gear transforms into the Xenogears. Graf appears, revealing that he had been inside Faye's father's body. After trying to merge with Faye, Graf reveals how Ellie and Maya are interconnected. In order to free Ellie, Maya, and all the women bound with them, Graf explains, Faye must cut the binds on mankind. He sacrifices himself to temporarily stop the Zohar. Faye discovers that he is a reincarnation of Abel, who made contact with the Wave Existence through the Zohar, Deuce's power source. It gave him the power to one day destroy Deuce and the Zohar in order to free itself. The Wave Existence also sensed Abel's longing for his mother and used the biological computer Kadomami to create the first Elham. After Deuce went out of control and was sealed, Abel was one of the many passengers on board the Eldridge, which was used to transport Deuce. When Deuce gained full control over the Eldridge, the captain decided to initiate the self-destruct sequence in an attempt to destroy it. Deuce and the Zohar survived the explosion and landed on a nearby planet. Elham, who had been transformed into the first Maya to serve as a mother of humanity, created the first humans. After this, she had created 2 copies of herself, who became 2 different beings with different tasks. Maya, with the task of gathering the components for Deuce's revival, and Ellie, who inherited the mother's will. Maya, along with Cain and the Gazelle Ministry, began watching over the first human civilizations on the planet, preparing for the day when they would be turned into wells and absorbed into Deuce to recover its strength. Ellie, meanwhile, found Abel and lived with him. When the now adult Abel and Ellie discovered this, they openly challenged Cain and the Gazelle Ministry, but were killed. However, through the power of the wave existence, they are able to be reincarnated in later eras. One of these incarnations lived during an ancient, technologically advanced era in Zebome, where he went by the name Kim. As he and his wife, Ellie, could not have a child, they created Emeralda. However, as Emeralda was about to be reclaimed by government soldiers, Kim and Ellie sealed Emeralda away and died. Eventually, Faye's party manages to destroy Merkava. But Deuce's completed form emerges from it. After a long battle in Deuce's core, Faye's party defeats Deuce. Searching for signs of Ellie, the party discovers a slight energy response within the core, which started to strengthen. The wave existence, which was used to power the very biological computers that led to Maya and Elham, was finally freed from its cage of fleshly existence. From within Zohar, it meant to travel to the higher dimension it originally came from, which, as Saitan revealed, would create enough energy to destroy the planet. Ellie, now free of Deuce's control and in its body, is trying to move it beyond the atmosphere, intending to sacrifice herself one last time. Faye gives pursuit in the Xenogears, the only gear left operational after the destruction of the Zohar modifier, and disappears into the rift. Inside, Krillian confronts Faye, asking why he is so attached to all the imperfections of human existence that he would prefer it over reverting everything back to where it had all began, when all was one in the realm of God. Because humans live in an imperfect state that is filled with sadness, Krillian wants to revert everything to the perfect, unified state of waves, filled with the love of God, instead of the false love that humans experience. Faye rejects Krillian's ideology, stating that humanity's imperfections meant they had to help each other in order to live, which led to mutual understanding. Perfection is not needed for love to exist, and Faye understands this through Ellie and her actions. He argues that Ellie is trying to heal Krillian's heart, and that Krillian doesn't need to become one with God in order to understand her love. Krillian challenges Faye, telling him to prove this love that could make him independent of God, and calls forth Urlabolus, a gigantic serpent-like being, bearing the last visage of Maya. Xenogears appears, and Faye phases into it, using it to defeat Urlabolus. After Faye defeats Ouroboros, Ellie appears. Ellie reveals that Krillian released her, and tells Faye that Krillian was deeply saddened by Sophia's death and loved humanity greatly, and so he tried to make it so that no one would experience loss again. Krillian appears again after Faye almost sacrifices himself to save Ellie in the dimensional rift. Krillian says that now there is no more God, that this is now their planet. He then reveals that he won't be returning, as he can no longer live as an ordinary human after everything he has done. Faye begs for Krillian to reconsider, but Krillian solemnly replies that he has chosen to walk with God, by following the wave existence back to its higher dimension, via the path of Sephiroth. Two glowing wings bloom on his shoulders, and he says, "Actually, I envy you two," as he disappears. Faye and Ellie then return to their planet, along with Xenogears, and reunite with the rest of the party. At the very end of the game, Katomani is seen on the cliff, and a glowing feather falls from the sky. Xenogears Episode 5 appears on the screen, indicating that the game is actually Episode 5. Now that's it for the plot overview. We're going to move on and do a story review and analysis. The story in this game is amazing, and is by far its best aspect. It can be hard to follow at times, and it gets pretty out there, especially towards the end, but I think that's part of what makes it so great. I loved how the story went from a basic JRPG story to absolute insanity in the first hour, and the story had a lot of twists, some being better than others. The twists keep the plot engaging though, and you can tell a lot of care went into writing the story and creating this world. The subtle foreshadowing throughout the game is well done too. On a second playthrough of the game, you really pick up on a lot of foreshadowing you wouldn't have noticed before. One of the things that makes me love this story is how creative it is. I love how it mixes sci-fi and spiritual elements together, and the story behind Deuce and Solaris is insane. The twist where you finally figure out what's going on hits so damn hard too. This is a game where I'd love to play it again with no memory of it, so I could experience the story and how it unfolds for the first time again. Learning about the world and the various events that have taken place through dialogue was fascinating as well. It gave the world such a massive scope that sets it apart from other JRPGs, especially since the lore of the world is so well written. I loved how dark and mature the story was as well. It's by far the darkest JRPG I have ever played. The characters are amazing too. There are so many memorable and well-written characters, like Faye, Billy, Graf, Saitan, Rico, Ellie, Bart, Ramses, and Krillian. The character development is awesome. It's satisfying seeing Faye go from being unwilling to fight to being ready to lay down his life to defeat Solaris, or when Ellie finally switches sides, and Faye and Ellie's relationship and how it develops throughout the game. Even the villains have development, like Ramses, which was a dark and well-executed character arc. There's so many other great character arcs in the game. These are just the ones that come to mind currently. Overall, I think what makes the story so good is the attention to detail the world has, the strong character writing, the themes, the lore of the world, how unique the concept is, and how complex the story gets. Now, a problem I have with this story is how hard it is to follow sometimes. There's so many different plot points and pieces of lore that are important for understanding the story, but are only shown in the Perfect Works book. And if you don't talk to NPCs, you can miss out on important info for the story. Like when you get to Shavat, talk to everyone. That lore is important, and you can easily miss talking to everyone if you're playing without exploring. The story still makes sense, but it can take a little bit before you fully grasp the story and its concept. The rushed pacing on Disc 2 is another problem. I still think the story is excellent and ends strong at Disc 2 though, so it's not that bad. It's just a lot of story at once with little gameplay compared to the first disc. With that being said, I still love the story and think it's a masterpiece despite its flaws. Now moving on to a mini analysis I wanted to do on the story. The story has a lot of allusions to real-world religions and psychological concepts like Gnosticism, mysticism, Jungian psychology, and biblical symbolism. The story itself questions the nature of existence, culture, faith, and religion. I'm now going to explain how the game questions these concepts. In fact, I'd say the story is designed to make the player question these concepts. In the story, the normal people on the surface are used by the Solarians, who label them as the sheep, to be controlled by them, the shepherds. The Solarians are led by the Gazelle Council, and some other key figures that actually know the true nature of the world. These leaders of Solaris purposely spread misinformation about their religion and the lambs to keep the general population of Solaris in control as well. Solaris has also established the Ethos, an organization which controls the excavations and the knowledge of the world. The Ethos also spreads misinformation to the surface dwellers, like humans being on the planet for 10 million years, when they've actually only been there for 10,000 years. They spread their own false religion to keep the surface dwellers in control as well. So, the nature of existence, religion, faith, and the culture of the world has been manipulated to be a system of control, which keeps the ignorant masses ignorant while serving the few elite members. This is how the game's story makes the player question these real-life concepts, like the nature of existence, religion, culture, and faith, by creating scenarios where these concepts are weaponized and used against humans rather than being something positive. Another part in the story that is an example of this is Billy's subplot, where he has to come to terms with the fact that the Ethos is evil after following the religion for years. There's also Ellie, who struggles to leave the Gebler forces, which is a Solarian's army, due to years of them conditioning and training her. Ellie eventually leaves Solaris and realizes the Solarian culture is evil. The story behind Deuce itself and the ways that the various eras of history were manipulated by Miang and the Gazelle Council are also excellent examples of this, and are huge parts of the game. All of these plot points share common themes of humanism, religion, culture, and the nature of existence being manipulated, which further supports my point that the game's story is designed to make you question these concepts. I believe this is one of the reasons Xenogears' story resonated with so many people. It handles these topics in such an interesting way that makes the story so engaging, and it makes the player think about these important real-world concepts like religion and their effect on society. Now, there's so much more I could talk about and analyze for the story and the characters of the game. The story is so rich and complex I can make a whole video analyzing it, but for time's sake I'm going to cut it off here and move on to gameplay. Moving on, I want to talk about gameplay. The gameplay is like a classic JRPG. You can explore the map and towns, talk to NPCs, buy new items at shops, and fight random encounters on the overworld. However, the game stands apart from other JRPGs with its amazing story and unique combat. The game has two different combat systems, one for fighting on foot and one for fighting in gears. There are 9 characters that can be in your party, with a party limit of 3. The on-foot combat uses a variant of the A2B2 active timed battle system, which is also found in Chrono Trigger and various Final Fantasy games. When a battle starts, the screen transitions to a battle screen. During battle, you can use various ether spells or attacks along with martial arts. When using martial arts, you can do a combination of weak, strong, or fierce attacks. Each attack costs action points, or AP, for short. The weak attacks cost 1 AP, the strong attacks cost 2, and the fierce attacks cost 3. You can learn special death blows by using certain combinations of the attacks enough times. These death blow moves trigger a special animation and do more damage. It's very satisfying to use, and I love trying different combinations of attacks to unlock new death blows. You can keep track of which death blows you have, and how much progress you have for death blows you haven't learned by checking the status menu and going to skills. At first though, you won't be able to use death blows, since the player only begins with 3 AP to use each turn. But eventually, after gaining some levels and progressing the story, you get 5 AP, which allows you to unlock and use death blows. Death blows are very important, so make sure to fight enemies using different combinations of buttons to unlock them. You are going to need to grind to unlock most of them, but it makes the game so much easier, especially during boss fights, where death blows are vital for beating the boss. You have to hit various level requirements or progress through the story enough before you can learn most of death blows though, and there's lots of death blows for each character to unlock. At level 59, every character has access to all the death blows, except for Faye, who has some really powerful death blows that are only acquirable after hitting level 70 and 80. The late game death blows require 6 or 7 AP. Also, each time you unlock a death blow on foot, you unlock one to use while fighting in your gear as well, which is awesome. I love that you don't have to grind for gear death blows, and it was a wise decision to make the game like this. Now I previously mentioned Ether, which are basically spells. The characters unlock more Ether spells when hitting certain level requirements. Ether spells can give enemies status effects, heal the party, remove status effects, or do damage to enemies. The character has to have enough Ether points, known as EP, to use an Ether spell, which cost ranges depending on the effect, and these points do not replenish after each round like AP, so you must use items or sleep to restore EP. Also, some character spells aren't called Ether, and instead use various names like Chi or Arcane. This doesn't affect anything though. AP can also be saved and used as attack points for combo attacks. A total of 28 AP can be accumulated for combo attacks, which are powerful sequences where you can use multiple death blows together to deal massive damage. You can save AP by cancelling your attack, using the circle button before using a death blow, or by not using martial arts. These combos take a long time to build up, and you would be better off spamming your usual death blows during those turns, since it's quicker and more effective. Like, I barely used them in my first playthrough, that was 100 hours, and I still barely used them in my second playthrough. You can escape battles as well, which works the same way it does in literally every JRPG. Press the button for a chance to escape the battle. You can also use items to heal and buff yourself with status effects. That's it for the first combat system. Now moving on to the second combat system for while you're in Gears. While in Gears, a combination system is reduced to a selection of weak, medium, or strong attacks that build up the attack level of the gear with each turn until it can unleash a special attack. As mentioned before, these attacks are unlocked with each death blow the character unlocks while on foot. There are 4 attack levels. The first 3 are for death blows with higher attack levels being able to do stronger death blows. Level 4 is a special attack level where the gear goes into infinity mode automatically when it is reached. Infinity mode allows you to recharge more fuel and gives you the ability to use infinity attacks, which don't cost fuel and do massive damage. This mode only lasts 3 turns though, and to get it you have to reach attack level 3, then perform any action to gain attack levels. It's not guaranteed to trigger every time, but with each turn there is a chance. The chance is also displayed in percentage on the side of the screen. This mode is also only available during the late game. Other than that, gears regain fuel by charging, which gives you a different amount of fuel depending on the engine you have equipped and what attack level you're at, with each attack level adding 10 fuel to a base charge level of 30. Gears can use a booster option as well, which allows gears to act faster with the cost of consuming more fuel. There's also a special option command, which includes healing abilities and special attacks for gears. You can still use Ether spells in Gears too, and they're amplified while in Gears as well. When the gear is out of fuel, you can only charge for more fuel or use Ether spells, since they use Ether points and not fuel. That's it for the second combat system, and I think both these systems are great. They complement each other very well. I like how they made the gears different than fighting on foot. It changes up the gameplay and adds variety. Now I need to talk about the various stats for each character and the different gears. Character stats apply to both on-foot combat and gear combat. They include attack, hit percentage, defense, evade percentage, Ether defense, and agility. Each character starts with different amounts in each stat. Your stats also increase each time you level up. These stats can be buffed using items too, and each character can equip up to 3 items. There's also weapons, but only for certain characters like Ellie, Billy, and Bart. Bart uses whips, Billy uses various handguns, and Ellie uses rods. You can find better versions of these items throughout the game. Now moving on to gear stats. For each gear there's attack, defense, E for defense, response, agility, and E for amp. The most important stat by far for gears is response, since it affects hit chance and evade chance. If you get enough points in response, you'll be damn near invincible. This is especially true for early game and the mid game. Response kinda stops being important towards the end. ETH amp is another stat I wanted to point out, since it multiplies your character's ether when in a gear. This stat is very useful for characters like Ellie, who can be broken with ether abilities. I also thought this was a unique mechanic in the game, and it was a smart way of making ether attacks effective when in gears. Otherwise, they'd just be useless, since the enemies you fight in gears are a lot more powerful. These stats don't affect on-foot combat, but your character stats do affect combat in gears. Same with the items your character has equipped. This allows you to create some broken builds with the right combinations of items on your gearing character. It's awesome. I liked it since it added more depth and build variety to the game. Now I want to talk about how some of the characters have their own unique mechanics in combat, like Billy, Maria, and Choo Choo. So Billy uses guns, and you can change the ammo for all of his guns with various types, some having special ether effects. And you can swap out your handgun with different ones you find throughout the overworld. Maria doesn't have death blows or traditional spells. Instead, she has a controls option, which allows her to use ether points to call Sizebia to attack, doing massive amounts of damage. Choo Choo as well has no death blows, and no fuel since she can grow bigger herself. You get spells, 3 high damage attacks, and very high health to compensate for the lack of a gear and death blows. It's a fun character, but she doesn't really come into use that often. The enemy variety is great too. There's lots of different types, with some enemies requiring you to beat them in specific ways. The bosses as well are great. There's a ton of memorable boss fights in the game, like Deuce, Hammer, the Elements, the one against Ellie with her whole squad. There's more I could mention too. I think the gameplay overall was awesome. Grinding for death blows, exploring the overworld, and getting items for your character and gear is fun. The dual combat system is great. It's one of my favorite RPG systems. I find it engaging and I love the button combination mechanic. Having 2 combat systems also adds a lot of variety and depth to the gameplay. I enjoyed switching between being on foot to being in gears in the overworld and during combat. I liked how gears played differently compared to being on foot too. The character variety is awesome. I like how Marie, Choo Choo, and Billy all have their own unique mechanics. The items and character stats also add to the depth of the combat, since you can experiment and create some fun builds. There's a lot of items too. Most of them range from useless to pretty good, while some items are overpowered and just break the game's difficulty if used right, like ether doublers, speed shoes, and magnetic coats. One last thing to mention is the arena fights in the game. These parts allow you to fight in your gear against other gears. The gameplay switches to a fighter style of gameplay, similar to Street Fighter. It's pretty basic, but I had fun with it. Running around and using attacks is pretty fun too. It's a weird but very cool addition. You also get access to this arena during the end game, and you can grind for points to get various items, some being really rare. There's also a co-op mode where 2 players can fight, which was a cool addition. Now let's talk about my complaints I have with the gameplay. The first is a lack of any maps for the towns and some of the dungeons. This is annoying since there will be times where you get lost and have to look everywhere to find out where to go. And the fact that there's maps for dungeons like the Keslev sewers, which shows that the team were capable of putting maps in the game. The game really would have benefited from having a map the player could check in all the areas. The second problem is the menus in the shops. You can't go back in the menu and have to talk to the merchant again, and select the category of items you want to see again, which is irritating. And you have to go through the merchant's stupid little speech at the beginning every single time. Now I love Xenogears and I think the gameplay is great, but a serious flaw with the game is how unfinished the second disc is. This is due to the development problems which I mentioned in the introduction. Instead of following the events as they unfold, a majority of the second disc story is told in a flashback, with Ellie and Faye recalling the events while sitting in a chair. It's very disappointing since you don't get to actually experience anything that happens in these segments, and this section of the game feels more like a visual novel. It ruins the game's careful pacing as well. Stuff happens so fast in the second disc, it's like reading a summary of events, while the first disc took its time to flesh out the world and the story. There is some content in the second disc you can actually play through though, in between the flashbacks, and during these segments the story's pacing returns to normal. Too bad it couldn't have been like that the whole time in disc 2. Content-wise, there are bosses, 2 dungeons, and you get to explore the world again after the flashbacks have finally ended, so you can see how the world has changed throughout the game's story. There's also some endgame activities like the arena where you can fight to get items, or go up against your friends in 2-player battles, Dunman Isle, and the lighthouse where you can access a secret area to get overpowered endgame gear, and an upgrade for Esmeralda. This segment of the game has so much wasted potential, especially since this abrupt change in style happens at a key part in the game's story, where things are really starting to take off. I would have loved to experience a fully fleshed out second disc. I'm just glad the first disc was great and long. The second disc is very short compared to the first one, and you can tell it was rushed. The development team did the best they could though, and despite how flawed the second disc is, the story and gameplay are still excellent. Now, according to developer Tetsuya Takahashi, in a Kotaku interview from 2017, the reason for the game's unfinished second half was due to the team being mostly comprised of new staff members who had to be taught about the job. This combined with Squaresoft's strict 2-year deadline and the team's ambitious vision for the game resulted in delays in the development schedule, to the point that the development team had to make the second disc like this, or else they'd be forced to only release disc 1, ending the game where Faye and his crew escape from Solaris. Even though the developers had to rush the ending, I think they still did a great job, and with more time this game could have been even better. So initially Xenogears was planned to be the start of a franchise, and the development team was very ambitious with this concept. The game was episode 5 in a 6-episode saga, with episodes 1 to 4 being told through flashbacks in the game, and in the book Perfect Works, which has an English translation online for free. If you're a fan of the games, I highly recommend it. It gives so much more context to the game, and it makes everything make so much more sense. The book also provides a timeline of events for each episode, except for Episode 6. Episode 6 was supposed to be another game that was a direct sequel to Episode 5. Sadly, this didn't work out due to most of the development team leaving, and this entire episode is shrouded in mystery. It was said that Episode 6 was going to be the terminal point of the Xenogears saga by the development team in the Perfect Works book, but that could mean anything really, and with Deuce and the Zohar gone, who knows what direction they would have taken the story. So originally for this segment, I was going to read out the timeline of events from episodes 1 to 4. I just wanted to show how ambitious the developers were and how massive the scope of the world was. I also found a lot of the lore really fascinating and cool, but it would just make the video too bloated. So I'm going to recommend the English translation of Perfect Works once again if you want to see the timeline. So this timeline is awesome. It explains all the flashbacks to previous lives of Faye and Ellie. It also gave the full backstory for the first 4 episodes and the events leading into episode 5, which is great since the game only gives you brief moments of each episode. This book was created after the game released, and it's obvious that this was intended to flesh out the game's lore and world fully to make up for the rushed development. It gives lots of vital information for understanding all the episodes, some of which absolutely should have been in the main game, and probably would have if they had more time. There's also lots of cool information about the areas, characters, and the various gears as well, that I won't be covering in this video. Before moving on, I wanted to mention the spiritual successors to Xenogears, made by the same creative director, Xenosaga and Xenoblade. These aren't direct sequels to Xenogears, even if it does seem like Xenosaga could fit into the timeline, since it even has the Zohar. But these games are still great and the closest thing to another Xenogears game that we will ever get. There's tons of little homages and references to Xenogears 2 in both the series. And for Xenoblade 1, the main twist of the game is pretty damn similar to the main twist of Xenogears with Deuce. Now moving on to the conclusion of the video. Xenogears is my favorite RPG of all time. It has a special place in my heart. The gameplay is great, the story is amazing, and the characters are insanely well written and memorable. This is a game I see myself going back to again and again, despite its flaws, especially with the second half. I would kill for a remaster of Xenogears with a finished second half. With that being said, I'd give this game a rating of 10 out of 10. I know this is a very high rating and a lot of people would disagree, but I truly do not care. I enjoyed the game that much. Stay tuned for more content. Next video is going to be on a horror game, Obscure.